Hello, this is Mary Prasad, Artist in Residence with Imagine Crafts. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use StazOn Studio Glaze to make really beautiful background papers. For this project, you'll need the following supplies listed on the screen. When using regular cardstock, I prefer to coat it with some gesso to give it some tooth. I'll show you how it looks without the gesso in a few seconds. Be sure to go in both directions to give it an even coating. So here's the result of the Studio Glaze on regular cardstock. The colors are a bit faded, and if you like that, that's fine, but I prefer to have a more vibrant color. I did try to layer it up in the center there, but still I didn't like the color as much as I did with the gessoed cardstock. The left side is how it looks on gessoed cardstock. You can see the colors are very vibrant. On the right is not gessoed, but I used creative medium to mix in with the Studio Glaze, so it came out just fine. This last piece was done on glossy cardstock. The Studio Glaze glides more over the surface and gives a transparent look to it. Even when dry, the Studio Glaze retains a lot of its texture. Here's another look at the texture on the other piece. To create the dots, I use the stencil. I'll show you this a little later in the video. Here are some of the tools I used for creating these papers. A brush sticks with a chisel tip, a palette knife, and a couple of doodle sticks, one with a chisel tip and one with an angled chisel tip. These are made out of silicone and they're very easy to clean. These are the 4 Studio Glazes I'll be using. The specific colors are listed at the beginning of the video in the supplies. Be sure to give each bottle a shake before using it. Also wipe the tip before replacing the cap. Now for the fun part. Just grab some color and spread it around randomly. Use a little more pressure on the palette knife to get thinner, more transparent areas, or less pressure to get thicker, less transparent areas. You can also apply several colors at the same time by dipping in the palette knife. The brush sticks gives a slightly different look. The Doodle Sticks with the chisel tip allows you to make similar but smaller marks. The Doodle Sticks with the angled chisel tip allows you to make even smaller marks for detailed lines and also dots. Check out all that texture. I know it looks a little busy, but I'm actually going to use this for die cutting. Cleanup is simple. Just spray a little alcohol and wipe with a paper towel. For my gessoed sheet, I'm going to use StazOn ink and my large music stamp. For large stamps, I prefer to lay the paper on top and then rub the back. Unfortunately, I didn't get the middle of this one. In this case, it doesn't matter. I'm going for a sort of shabby look. I basically repeated the same process as before, except I didn't put quite as much on. Notice how the gesso grabs onto the color. It's not quite as transparent. For instance, you don't see as much white as you did with the glossy cardstock. For my last paper, I'm going to use VersaFine ink on regular cardstock and the same stamp. I also made sure to rub evenly along the back. This time I'm going to use Studio Glaze with Creative Medium through a stencil. I decided to use the shimmer version of the Creative Medium. You may have noticed those dots on top. These are my samples of what's inside. I create them using a circle punch. Sometimes I punch out both black and white cardstock so I can see how the product looks on each. You really don't need much of the Creative Medium. A little bit goes a long way. Add your Studio Glaze and then mix really well with a palette knife. If you think the paper or the stencil might move, you might want to tape both of them down. I'm just going to hold it firmly. Whenever you apply Creative Medium, make sure you go in both directions. To remove the stencil, just lift up a corner, hold down the paper, and then pull up. Allow it to dry completely before applying ink. In this case, I'm using the Brilliance Dewdrop ink in Rocket Red Gold. Before the ink dries, use a very slightly damp paper towel to wipe off some of the extra ink on the dots. I'll trim this down before using it on a card. Here's a look at the card I made with this paper. For details on making this card, please visit artbymdp.blogspot.com. Here's a close-up of the other papers I made in the video. I love the variations in colors and textures that these Studio Glazes produce. Not only are these papers great for cards, but also for scrapbooks and other projects. You can use these same techniques in multimedia projects. And check out how great these look when die cut. For more ideas and inspiration, please visit imaginecrafts.com.